Okay.
All right, welcome to users group meeting for the third quarter. It's February 9th, 2023, Thursday. Hopefully we'll be done before 3 o'clock, but the meeting is scheduled for 1 to 3. So welcome everyone, and I'll go ahead and give a call to order. And let's see, we have 42 participants in the meeting right now. If everyone has had a chance to review the agenda, I call for a motion to adopt it.
I so move.
I second it. Jenny from Marquette.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor to adopt the agenda as presented? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried and the agenda adopted. If everyone can look at your minutes, is there any corrections or additions? Then I will call for approval of the minutes. If I could have a motion.
So moved, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. And a second?
I'll second.
Thanks. Is that Rebecca?
Laura.
Oh, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor to accept the minutes or approve the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All ayes, motion carried. Thank you. All right, there's some committee notes from database and RSA Day Committee. The database meeting minutes were from October 13th, 22. I don't know if anybody from that committee wants to mention anything or.
Essentially, I'm just including these notes now for directors, managers, and supervisors to review. And unless there's anything spicy in them, we've been doing this for 3 years and there's almost no questions ever. So I'm to the point now where they're included for informational purposes only.
One thing I wanted to chime in, thank you, Jennifer, here at RSA for noticing, but we're getting the notes ready for the meeting that we just had in January, and we were looking at the October notes, and in your packet on page 7 of the database meeting notes, it mentions that there's 1,600 encoding level 8 NEM requests that the Cataloging Maintenance Center will help us with. There's actually 4,600. That was an incorrectly calculated number. So we did correct the number on the notes that are posted on the database page, but it was wrong in your packet. So I thought I'd mention it.
Thanks, Erica. And then Kendall has put up the RSA Day is coming up March 8th at 5 Points in Washington. The lunch is for the first 200. So if you haven't registered yet, there's already 125 people who are registered. So if you want to get lunch, you should register as soon as possible. All right, Board of Directors report. Alyssa?
I don't think Alyssa's on.
Alyssa
Actually.
is not here, but this is Jenny, Vice President, and she texted me and said she might not make it in time for the Board of Directors report, but also her Board of Directors report was simply to say that we approved next year's budget. I would imagine everything else in the board meeting will be covered at some point in this meeting. So there you go.
Thanks, Jenny. Is there any RSA independent project updates that you or Kendall want to give?
I'll do a quickie one. As you know, it was the holidays and nothing ever happens over the holidays. There may or may not be a second Prairie Cat meeting that is currently up in the air. I have contacted the lawyers for both IMRF. Well, I've contacted IMRF and I've contacted lawyers to start the III conversation, and I am awaiting responses. And as I don't know, we were told that dealing with IMRF to join IMRF is a painful process, and it is turning out to be a little bit of a painful process. But we knew that was going to be that way going in. So just getting a hold of them is, I think, 2/3 of the battle. Once we get actually moving on things, things will steady out a little bit.
Kendall, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I am sure that you gave the users group an update in the past, but forgive me for not remembering it. Is there anything you can share with us at this moment in time as to why there is debate if there's even going to be a second Prairie Cat meeting?
So the Prairie Cat RSA meetings, I think our executive committee was under the impression that they did not wish to move forward with a full-on merger, which I think was one of the things that Dee was talking about happening prior to her leaving. And so Rails went ahead and set up these meetings for us to talk about it, just to see if there was anything there. There's not. They're deep in their own issues and working on new things right now. And they quite frankly, again, due to their history, a lot of it, they're happy with where they are. And so the reason why I say we're awaiting a date, if there's going to be a second meeting with only Prairie Cat, or if that meeting will get expanded out, which was my suggestion, to all consortia, to see if they're basically to look for ways that consortia can work together rather than trying to force something to happen. All of that got kind of stuck in this last couple of weeks of Rails looking for a new director and then naming a new director this week. So now that Monica is the director, I think part of the decision-making process was awaiting a director to be named. And now that she is named, she's, there's a big pile of stuff for her to work through. My suggestion to them was, I think we've gone as far as we can go with Prairie Cat in one-on-one meetings. The types of things that we would be talking to Prairie Cat for outside of a merger, areas where we could work together, throwing a joint consortia day for library staff, things like that. These are things that we could do with any of the consortia in Rails, and it makes a lot more sense to be talking to everyone about these things rather than just one other consortia.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that in the past, like probably over a year ago, there was just a very brief conversation about RSA reaching out to another consortia within Rails. Is that line of thinking being pursued?
There's no one that makes sense to do it with.
Okay.
To be frank.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, there's really no one. Lexi asked in chat, she's still not clear on why RSA is separating from Rails. So what's happening is RSA staff members, myself and the other 10 of us at the moment, are employed by Rails. That is a long-standing, that's just how it's been, right? RSA, Magic, Swan, and Prairie Cat, at time of merger in 2011, we were all employees of our local library system, and we moved from Alliance Library System into Rails as Rails staff members in kind of our own little department. And there's a contract between RSA, the organization, which has no employees, and Rails, the organization, which supplies manpower, vehicles, building, all kinds of things, HR, finance, that kind of thing, to RSA. So over the years, first Swan pulled out of Rails, and they did that because the Swan board wanted more control over Swan's staffing situation. So the Swan board hired their own staff. Then Magic, which used to be Rails employees, Magic dissolved and merged into Swan. So those employees went away. And then 4 years ago, Prairie Cat started their independence project because the Prairie Cat board wanted more, wanted to directly employ their staff members at that time. So Prairie Cat became independent. And when we talk about independence from Rails, what we're really talking about is staff independence. Yeah, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. But it's staff independence is what we're actually talking about. RSA, the organization, is completely separated from Rails, but contracts with Rails to do things. So the issue now is that visually, when you look at an org chart and explainability wise, it is hard to justify RSA remaining as Rails employees because it is a benefit that no other consortia has or can get. So we're kind of a historical oddity that we're still left here, but you know, the Rails board has been asked by you know, other people why we still exist, and there's not a good answer other than, well, we've always existed. When we get to the budget section, you'll see that we don't really cost Rails anything anymore. Starting next year, we are paying 100% of our costs for everything. But hand in hand with that, it still is that visual that RSA has an unfair advantage in that we have staffing through Rails. We also have the building and the vehicles and, you know, IT support and things like that. So everyone else, for the most part, is completely independent from Rails. Prairie Cat is still in the, currently for this year, is still in the Burr Ridge build, not the Burr Ridge building, I'm sorry, the, what's that other one? Brook something. I can't think of it. The Bolingbrook, thank you. I knew it was a B word. The Bolingbrook building, and they've got people in the Coal Valley building, I believe, but I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Prairie Cat is planning on exiting the Rails buildings for the most part, if not completely, at the end of this fiscal year. So we're kind of the vestigial thumb of Rails at this point, and so that's what kicked off the whole independence project. And that, again, that's for staff independence, but staff independence brings a lot of change to RSA, governance structures, you know, HR, finance, potentially, although we can continue to contract for finance, buildings where we work from. There's just a lot that goes with it. So that's why we're doing it. If I had my druthers, you know, while sometimes being a Rails employee is a lot of work. There's a lot of extra things that we do as Rails employees, and there are sometimes some limitations put on us because we're Rails employees that we may or may not have if we contracted for or directly employed all of our own employees. But the upside is very high in that we have lots of support services. So that, you know, it's one of those things that it's maybe not exactly what we wish to do, but it's what we need to do. So that's why we're working on it. And Rails did give us a hard out that we have to be staff independent by.
It's almost like they feel like we're a failure to launch kind of thing. And I feel like a surly teenager that's getting kicked out of the family home. So, hey.
That is a very good way to put it. Yes.
Are there any other questions about the Rails independent project update?
I did not hear that, Beth. I don't know if it's just me or if you're far from the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. Cataloging department update.
Hi, everyone. The first thing I thought I would do is just ask if there were any questions about the cataloging update document that was included in the users group packet. Okay, I have a few slides. Progress on the cataloging request backlog. Since the November 2nd users group, the team has closed just over 1,000 cataloging requests. The number of cataloging requests still open that RSA will process is just over 600. The age of the oldest open request is from June 2020. We will continue replying to cataloging requests as they're processed, so the submitter knows that they're closed and the record has been upgraded to full OCLC cataloging. Next slide, please. We have been placing holds on items as we've worked through the backlog. We've been doing this if the digital images or scans associated with the cataloging request have been lost, incomplete, or unreadable. We do put a comment on the hold that notes it's being sent to RSA for cataloging. Thank you to any of you whose libraries have sent us these items. It really makes the process go more smoothly when we have the item in hand to get the OCLC record in the database to replace the brief record. Next slide, please. The Cataloging Maintenance Center, as I mentioned when I chimed in about the database meeting notes, how there was a mistake there. So there's just over 4,600 open cataloging requests that they will process. Those are just records with different levels of detail than the records we have been processing in the backlog. A top priority for this year is getting the CMC started on the level 8 and the M records. I know that's something we've talked about for at least a couple years, and this year we're going to make a push to make it happen. The age of the oldest cataloging request that the CMC will process, that's an 8, is from 2018, and the oldest one that's an M that they'll process is from 2017. So there's quite a bit there. So we do expect it will take them time, but it will be great to have them helping us. Next slide, please. We have had a couple libraries, more than a few libraries, which is great, have reported cataloging issues to our help desk. Maybe it's an item on the wrong record, it's a duplicate record. Keep reporting these things to us if you see them. There's no need for you to contact the library that caused the issue. We prefer that we reach out for several reasons. So we want consistency in how issues are handled. Saves you the time of contacting the other library and explaining the issue. Helps avoid friction between members, and then gives us a teachable moment, and we can be open with the library about what we're doing to correct their item. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned a couple slides ago, the Cataloging Maintenance Center, getting them started on that portion of the backlog is one of our priorities, and it plays into our theme. So no later than June 1st this year, RSA will complete our portion of the backlog. No later than June 1st, we will establish a procedure for our staff internally to follow when we reach out to you to ask you to send your brief items for OCLC cataloging. Also by June 1st, we'll have a procedure for you, the members, to follow when we ask you to send your brief items to us for OCLC cataloging. By July, the cataloging team will start reaching out to you to ask for brief items so that we can improve them to OCLC cataloging. We're going to target at least 150 brief items upgraded each month to OCLC records. And like I said, like I mentioned earlier, working with the Cataloging Maintenance Center to start their portion of the backlog no later than September 1st. So we will keep you informed during these meetings and database committee meetings as we make progress. The listserv too will be kept up to date. Any questions about this information?
And Erica, when there are updated records on OCLC, when you run the processes every quarter, that record is exported then and overlaid onto our record. Is that correct?
Do you mean the holdings being updated in OCLC?
No, like a record, like a bib record that was maybe a incomplete record and now it's a more complete record. Do those get downloaded with the holdings information?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm following.
So-
I think the question, let me try and restate from a non-cataloger point of view. I think, Beth, what you're asking is for those things that are brief records, when we do our holdings updates, if OCLC has a better record than the one in our system, it doesn't get downloaded. That holdings update is one way only. It's from us to them. However, anytime anybody overlays one of those brief records that's in our catalog, whether it's one of our cataloging staff or one of you guys downloading a better record and importing it into the system, then everything gets updated and overlaid at once.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall.
All right.
Did Erica have anything else? All right, then Member Services Department update.
So I'll start off real quick. One thing that we were asked for to work on was a patron status that could be used like the user profile of C staff. The libraries didn't want to change the profiles. They just wanted a way to note that the patron should come and see them. That would pop up on the staff screen in workflows, or would block somebody from checking out at the self-check and force them to come over and see the staff to update something or whatever. And so we've been working with CRC Dynex to do this. And right now there is a C staff patron status that you can manually change on the modify user screens. I think it's the second tab in. You could, we are currently, it is set to operate like a blocked patron. The problem is that when you go to take them off of C staff status, you have to do two different steps, and it is not at all something that you would be able to guess, versus if we set the C staff status to be like, to work like a blocked patron, then when the patron comes and see you, then all you have to do is go in and click on that and you can reinstate the user. So we are going to be working with CRC Dynex next week to talk through the ups and downs of that. And once we have it finished and we have an actual, we know how it will end up being set up, and we know how your staff should be using it, you should expect to see an email with a quick kind of, here's what you can do with this. If you want to use it, great. If you don't want to use it, that is fine as well. But we did have several libraries ask for an alternative to the C staff user profile. The other thing that we've heard a lot about outside of IPLAR reports, which we'll talk about later, are new directors, or directors that have been around a while but are now used to being a new director and are now trying to get a little bit deeper into understanding what RSA does. And so that always reminds us that we are happy to do new director visits or new manager visits. We do have the spreadsheet out on the main page of the RSA support staff for anyone who would like to sign up for a 45-minute to an hour-long member services virtual visit. And that can be on anything you want. So if you would like to ask somebody in member services about, say, your CERC rules, or why, if you want to think about maybe changing hold rules or whatever, you can always call us. But if you think it's going to be something that's going to take a while to explain, or you want to talk it through and you want a good deep dive on it, please sign up for one of those member services virtual visits, or just send an email to the help desk and say, hey, we would love for you to come in and come and see us. That's what we're here for. All right, I will turn it over to James. Just real quick on these annual themes. So this is new for RSA this year. I asked each of the departments to come up with an annual theme, and that is kind of the thing that the department itself is going to focus on, and then RSA has an overall annual theme as well. But the idea with an annual theme is this is not a project. This is not something that we're just going to kind of look at and then move on, or something that we need to implement for a new, a new feature or whatever. The annual theme was meant to be something kind of larger than the team or larger than RSA that's going to take a while to get done. And that may or may not have anything to do with directly supporting you or not. It turns out that the cataloging theme does directly support you in the libraries, as does the member services and systems annual theme. So I will hand it over to James. That's why just wanted to point out that the annual theme is something new that we're doing this year.
So hello, everyone. Right now with Anna gone, of course, I'm in charge of member services and systems. So our annual theme this year is user records. So hopefully this will help everyone out. We're going to try to clean up all the user records. So we decided the first thing we're going to do is clean up the expired user records. And our first step, Sarah will talk right after me here. She's going to review a policy. So our first thing we figured before we start cleaning up things would be get rid of expired users, because why fix things? Let's get rid of expired users first. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of a lot of expired users. Our first thing, of course, will be schools. They're going to be one of the easiest ones to do because, well, if their students are gone, clearly we could get rid of them. So we'll be sending a lot of reports with member services. Clearly, they're going to be contacting libraries. Doug as doing reports, me doing batch edits. So we'll work together as a team and do a lot of things. The next thing, duplicate users. We know how it is. There's a lot of duplicate users in there. And then bad IDs. We know that there's a lot of bad IDs out there. So that's the third step we're going to do. Correct user profiles. We know that a lot of libraries are using bad profiles, whether they're using instead of staff def as an example, some libraries are using staff. Some are using, just different wrong profiles. So we want to clean them up. While we're doing that, then we're going to go ahead and do the drop-down menus, make sure everybody has the correct drop-down menus once we fix them. So we're going to clean up all that kind of stuff. And then we'll move into making sure the birth dates are correct, the fixing the ages. So, I mean, clearly this is a very long, year-long project. And then the last thing we'll do, I'll batch edit everything. We know everything in workflows is supposed to be uppercase. We know everything is not that way. So once the database is all good, then I could go ahead and batch change everything into uppercase. So just a quick little synopsis of how everything was going to work. So if you have questions, we'll take them here afterwards. But before the expired user policy, I'm going to have Sarah talk about this because we want to make sure the policy is correct before we go ahead and do this expired user policy. So Sarah, if you're ready, go ahead, Kendall.
Real quick to point out, we're not doing anything without your input.
Yes.
So we will be contacting each of you multiple times this year as we work through those steps.
Yeah, we're just not going to start deleting your patrons and stuff like that. We're clearly going to be sending reports to you. Yes. So do not be scared. We're just not going to all of a sudden say, hey, where's our patrons? Yeah, we're going to get approval from you. We're going to be sending lists to you saying, here, these are your users. This, is this okay? I'm not going to delete anything without your approval. And when I send you a list, I'm going to get confirmation from you. Hey, is this clarification? This is the list I'm going to delete. Approval from you, just so I know. So when you contact me, say, hey, where are these users? I'm going to have a list that say, hey, you sent this to me and you verified. So this is who I deleted and you told me it was okay. So Sarah, if you're ready, go ahead and want to go ahead and talk.
Sure.
I don't know if you have a slide or anything for you or not.
Can I ask a question first?
Yes.
I guess it's more of a comment and a question. So regarding expired users, and this may have to be referred to a subcommittee, but last year we worked with RSA and we worked with unique verification services to do verification. And like, it was really easy. And I'm more into automation of how we can, thank you, Victoria, how we can make this process easier on our patrons. Like the credit card company, they just keep sending you a credit card. Like, I know we have like legalities regarding the library cards, but what can we do automation wise to make, not be wholesaling, deleting users and expiring them out, when they come, if their address is still verified and good. And so I really think as part of our tiered membership system that we are considering, we should have RSA just do the unique verification. I think, is it Swan that automatically does it? One of the systems does do it already.
Swan is doing address verification, but I don't believe they have tied it to keeping patrons in the system or not. They just run their patron database through Unique to get things updated with the mailing address, the official mailing address.
Okay. And then second, when we get to talk about duplicate users, I also think that needs to be referred to a committee, because I understand why you might not want duplicate users, but I also feel like, if little Mary, who lives in Morton, her parents tragically got divorced and her dad lives in Peoria and doesn't want to deal with Mary's Morton card, that's what Mary's mom's responsibility is. Why can't Mary have two cards?
That's
why are we
is,
punishing Mary?
that's why it's
poor little
second,
sweet child.
so that we have time to go through and make sure that whatever it is we decide we're doing with duplicate users is in fact checked against our system policy. I think we have a duplicate user system policy too. I just don't know what it is. But yeah, that's another reason why these are broken out, because many of these have policies that go with them. And depending on what type of library you are, the policy needs to be different, or the retention schedules are different. There's all kinds of fun with this. Basically what I'm saying is, other than school libraries that have people that graduated 5 years ago, this gets to be a much more difficult question when we start talking about all of the various municipal, city, county libraries.
Okay. All right. Sarah, what is the name of your cat? Was my final question.
Rory.
Lovely.
Thank you. So I dropped the user policy in the chat so that everybody could see it if they wanted to, or the retention schedule. Yeah, there it is. So right now, this is what libraries are supposed to be following. It obviously doesn't take into account schools, because a school probably isn't keeping or wanting to keep records 8 years after a student leaves. So we are having a sub-policy committee meeting next week to kind of go over this, make sure that it's what libraries are still wanting, that if it still works for everybody, and then either adding a note about schools or coming up with our own policy for retention of cards for schools. And then hopefully we'll have that fine-tuned and be able to send that out for a vote or something like that soon.
And this is one of those policies that was approved, 10 years ago now.
Yeah, it's old.
So it's an old policy. It has not been reviewed in quite some time. And we're not sure how exactly perfectly representative it is of everybody's needs anymore. Excuse me. But I do know that, unencumbered library cards should be deleted no later than 2 years after expiration date. There are a lot of them that aren't. But, that's why we do things like this, is we periodically review things.
Yeah, so if you have any concerns or suggestions about this, you can either email them to me, or if your CERT person is on the sub policy committee, we are meeting next week, and I'll be looking for suggestions and input on how to improve this if needed. So that's all I've got.
All right. Beth, the idea behind here is trying to find out if there are things that are going on in your library that have to do with RSA system or some other associated RSA thing that we have that we might be able to solve for you. The last big one we did was working to make reciprocity better, which turned into a whole big old long thing last fall, but that was good. So we thought we would ask if anybody's got any issues in your library or working with other libraries or at other libraries that we could maybe take a look at to try and solve.
I would still love if you could print out a label from RSA so that you can put it in delivery.
Yeah, I'd love that too. Unfortunately, RSA's labels would look different than everybody else's labels, who would look different from everybody else's labels. Rails actually, at one point in time, was trying to see if they could write software to intercept the label printing and generate a label that would go on a sticky back printer that you could just directly slap on an item and send it through delivery. But it turned out that that was trying to get software set up that could correctly label across like 20 different automation systems and 1,500 libraries was not workable.
Well, this is a great discussion topic. It's just that stuff going on in my library is nothing that RSA could help with.
I would really love, oh, this is Lexi over Washington. I know that there is the email receipt button option. Is there I mean, I think this is a Cersei thing, but it would be really nice if we could have receipts be automatically emailed. So like the default is emailing, and then there's a button where we can print rather than the other way around. Because most of our patrons just throw out their checkout slips, and we are wasting a ton of paper.
I don't, as far as I know, I don't believe that there is, but like I said, we have a call coming up next week. So I'm going to add that to my list of things to ask Cersei. So you would like emailed receipts, checkout receipts by default with printed on request. And it needs to be selectable per library.
Yeah. Lexi, this does not at all answer your question, and maybe more trouble than it's worth. But there is a check mark that you can put in between work in the printer setup that it does the printer dialogue, and then you can cancel it. I find it at the front desk to be more annoying than it's worth, but at our one in the workroom that we only rarely want to print a receipt at, I've got it set up that way. So if your patrons really don't want receipts, you could do that. But like I said, I find it more annoying than it's worth.
Yeah, because every time you check something out, the printer dialog box pops up and you have to hit OK to print, or you hit cancel every single time you do a checkout. So yes, it can be annoying, but if you don't want the, like Elizabeth said, if you don't want it to print, you just have to hit cancel. So
That's what we do here in Morton. It's not that
Yes.
annoying.
Yes, it is, Alyssa.
No.
When I
if you're
was,
not used to it, it could probably be annoying. Yes.
when I was doing boxes and boxes during quarantine, when I was doing boxes and boxes of stuff to go out, I would just turn the printer off entirely and look on the website for, okay, where's this need to go? Rather than the yes and no.
Constantly searching
Maybe-
for.
Maybe
large
it
type.
would be possible to ask Cersei if they can have, something at the bottom where it says, email to a certain person. If you can say, do you want to print this, rather than set up a printer?
Like the idea of Lexi's default to print or default to email with an option to print. I mean, like I said, we have it set up so that we intercede with our printer every time, and it's not that big of a deal for us to cancel that print notification for people who don't want the receipts. But so there are workarounds, but I feel like we also really push the RSA Cat app, and we have lots of people who say, oh, I just manage it in there and I can see it in there. So that's another. We have a QR code at the desk where people can just, if they don't have, we say, oh, just scan that QR code and download the app. And we get a high turnover rate with that.
Yeah, because we have a lot of patrons who wouldn't want an email either. They don't want either. And so they wouldn't necessarily want the email option.
And
for a
those
print.
of you that, just in case, if you're not sure what we're talking about, those of you that have a printer, if you want that box to pop up, if you went to preference, peripherals, and then receipt printer, just make sure that check mark where it says display receipt printer dialog is checked. And then every time you print, that the receipt will pop up to print. That's where it is. So you want to make sure that display receipt printer dialog is checked. And then every time you receipt will print, it will pop up. So if that's not checked, the receipt will automatically print every time.
If we're talking about things that we wish Cersei would do, I wish when a patron's expiration date is close, that instead of just announcing that the checkout date has been shortened, it would give me the opportunity to cancel the checkout and change their expiration date if that was appropriate. That is my number. I think that is my number one complaint for all of the time, that everywhere else it asks me 7 times, did I really intend to do that? But that one just announces. And yes, I know we should be able.
I'm adding that to the list too.
I know we should, it does pop up there when their card's expiring, and we should see it and we should catch it. But the reality is, yeah, we don't always. And
I would like to bring attention in a second to Bobby Mock's comment about searching for large type paperback and getting more consistent patron search returns, because I'm doing a lot of homebound delivery too, and needing large print, or have patrons who only want large print in paperback, or in paperback under 500 pages. So having a better facets for that would be, or better cataloging or whatever would be helpful.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. I'll talk with Erica to see if we can figure out a way to set up like a predefined filter kind of thing on that, so that we could like add it to the drop downs for the libraries that wanted that. next to the home menu where you would, you'd be able to select on like large type paperback. I don't know how many we have and I don't know how they're cataloged, so I don't know how well we'll
cataloged
be
as
able to.
paperback.
Yeah, I don't know how, if we'll be able to tell enough or not. Like if you do, for example, if you do like item type paperback and item category 3 large print, does that get you a viable list? I don't know, right? So we'll take a look at that on the back end and see if there's something that we can figure out to create a search for that.
I would be interested to know how people are using Cat 4s and Cat 5s, because that's where we put our paperback or hardback in. So I guess I'm not sure if everybody else is doing that, because we've only recently started to do that in the last like 2 years. So I guess it would be nice, I think, to have a discussion with some other libraries on how they might go about doing it, maybe at a database meeting, and talk about how we do it.
We're
That's-
having trouble with libraries. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was gonna say, there are lots of things that I have no Cat 4 or 5 in, and I'm okay with that, even if Eric is not. But when I do use it, I use it for like the holiday books, and these are all the Christmas books, and these are all the Valentine's Day books, and these are the soccer books, and these are the and I don't use it for production format at all. I honestly don't use anything for production format. I could be convinced to change if that was really helpful. I do tell my staff, if it says 17 or 18 centimeters, it's a paperback. If it says 22, it's probably a hardback, but yeah, I don't put format in anywhere, really.
I think a more reliable way will be trying to look at the information on the bibliographic record, because Elizabeth, like you mentioned, not everybody's using the category 4s and 5s consistently. And we have trouble with libraries. We talked about it at the last database meeting. Some libraries aren't even using any large print codes for their large print books. It's just cataloged, making it look like it's a regular book, but it is attached to a large print record. So I can look at the record and see if there might be something we can use, like Kendall was saying, for a search filter. I just don't think we're going to get reliable results based on item type, home location, or the item category, since everybody uses different codes.
I will say I am not looking for large type paperbacks. I just am looking for large type when I'm looking. I have reasonably good luck limiting it to category 3 large print. I think because of the script you have in there, and enough places are doing that I have reasonably good luck doing that.
All right. Anybody else have anything? This might be a good time for a 5-minute break then.
Okay, it's 1:51. Take a 5-minute break. We'll meet back at 5:56. All right, it's 1:56. Are we ready to go again?
We are ready to go. All right, go ahead.
James still have some more things to cover for system department update, or is that okay?
Yeah, a couple things. James and I will tag team on. As I mentioned earlier, one of the trends is everybody's asking for IPLAR data, and that's fine. You can send us an email in the help desk and we will send you the IPLAR data that you request. For those of you that have BCA logins, you can go to the shared reports. 3 survey reports folder has the IPLAR reports in it. And so there's a count of items at your library, answers to IPLAR questions, which hopefully have not changed from this year to last year. Maybe they have, but the data that they return are still the same. The IPLAR CERC numbers and the count at your library for number of patrons you have. Just as a reminder, that question on the IPLAR about how many interlibrary loan requests did you receive? Not how many items did you actually receive, but the number of requests. That is a number that our system does not count or calculate unless a copy level hold or a library level hold is placed. But any system-wide hold is just placed against whatever item the patron happened to click the place hold button on, and it gets spread out randomly. So there's no real way to count it. We have been sending a end of month report that's kind of an estimate of that number, but frankly, take the number of filled holds you have, multiply it by 10 or 15% so that you have a bigger number and just fill in the block with that. There is no actual official number for the number of ILL requests in the system. Doesn't exist. All right, Doug was going to talk about this, but he is out with a sick kid today, so I'll cover it. We have been replacing the Symphony end of month reports with ones that run in BCA. You get those on the 1st of the month, and they appear in your inbox as a usually an Excel document with a couple of tabs on it. And those reports are more accurate than the and better named, frankly, and give you more information than the Symphony reports that have been coming to your Gmail boxes since 2007 to answer questions that no longer exist. So just so that you know, the ones that you got on February 1st are the last ones for most of those that we are going to send to your Gmail. We will continue running them in the back end through at least the 1st of July. And if you need them during the month, you can request the previous months and we will just pull it out of workflows and send it to you. But honestly, you should be using the BCA reports. They are better. And then we have a list of the ones that are getting stopped. Now, this is part of a document that went out several months ago that was talking about the new end of month reports, which is that column on the left. The 2 columns in yellow on the right, those are the ones that will be stopping those reports. So charged by item type 1 July through 30 June, renewal, all of those 3 reports at the top are replaced by the monthly reports, circulation last 12 months report. So we're going to stop running those. All of these reports here in this yellow here, we are going to stop those. So we will never again have a question of what does A1 minus your library mean? Or what does A2 and A3 mean? All of those reports were named to answer a question that existed on a web-based form in 2007. And we just kept running them because that's what people were used to seeing. And so we have finally gotten around to replacing them. So there are still a couple that have not been replaced, and we will need to work on those. Those are CERC by branch, for those of you that have branches. C1 minus your library, total CERC last month, total CERC by library, and then the B1 report, the B1 ILL state report is the name of the report that comes to your inbox, and it's an estimate is a generous term for what that number is. It's a pretty much a fictional number, so we'll end up stopping that eventually because it's not a real number. Any questions about that? Like I said, if you have not moved over yet, this is a good time to look at both of the new reports that come from BCA, and those, by the way, the ones that are coming from BCA, if you don't know, those come from distribution services. Those are the ones you want. The ones that are sent by library staff and RSA CAT, those are the ones coming from Symphony that will be stopped. But hopefully on the 1st of March, you will not be completely flooded with reports in your inbox anymore.
Bobby had a question on there, Kendall.
Yes.
Can you send us a copy of that red and yellow slide? Because I know that when we switched over from some of the other reports into some of these, there was a historic tracking question that at the time my director had, and I always would forget when she would randomly ask. So could you just email that to those of us who have to look long-term at some of these reports and go, this is what that was, and now this is what it is, and that's what it's gonna, you know?
Yeah, that went out a while back. I will hunt that email down and include it as part of the wrap up that comes out tomorrow, Monday or Tuesday from the meeting.
Wonderful, thank you. I apologize for missing it.
Sure, no, that's not a problem. And it might, hold on a second, it might have been, I have all these screens open. You know how it is. You don't need to see this. Let me get this out of your view so I can look at it and see if this was one of the things that actually went out. Not that one, not that one. No, it did not go out this time. It went out last time. So I will link to that in the meeting wrap up that comes out by email with the state of the RSA report. Not a problem.
Thank you.
So the 2 legacy reports that I have been using for a long time. No, not on that sheet. Are the C1 and the circ by user profile last month.
Mm-hmm.
Which I didn't see anywhere on any of the lists. The circ by user profile last month. Because I have a lot of Putnam County people who are in profile non-RSA. And they still want to know how many reciprocal things I did and stuff. They don't call it C1 anymore, but they still want to know, so. All right, I will have to look at that one closer then, because I didn't think I saw that information on there when I was looking at them the other day. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, everybody, Zoom just crashed on me. Am I still sharing anything?
No.
Hold on, I need to be sharing that screen. All right, so I think I heard correctly, Elizabeth, it crashed right at the end of yours, that you need that C1 report, which I thought we were sending out. If we are not sending it out, it is something I know that we can recreate.
You sent it out. You sent it out this month. And I don't necessarily need it. I just need something that tells me X number of Lakin people came to Henry and checked out books. And that has been the report where that information was.
Okay. All right. Just to help me out, if you send me an email or send an email to the help desk.
Okay. Yep.
With what you need, we'll check and make sure it's on the list of the reports that are going out. And if it's not, then it'll be added to the one that needs to be updated. But right now, that C1 minus your library, that one has not been completely replaced yet. And so it will, these are the reports that will continue to come to you until we replace them. All right. The last step of our project to update all of the new materials item types was the rule that things could only be new for 12 months. As we converted all the libraries over, the one thing that we did do was we set up what we call a denewing report that lists out, based on your library's new materials age limit that you guys set. It lists out all the items that have exceeded your limit. So your time limit might for new books, it might be 3 months. For new DVDs, it might be 2 months. For new movies, maybe it's 6 months, doesn't matter, right? You should be getting a report now on a monthly basis that lists out any materials, if you have any, that are older than whatever your local limit for those things was. And I don't really care what your local limits are, as long as after 12 months, everything has been moved out of the new item type fields. That's the important part. So what we will be happening is, starting on the 10th of the month, we will be sending out a report to any library who currently has items in the new materials item types that are not lost, missing, damaged, on order, or in a discard location. And that 12-month time period is based on the date the item was cataloged. And we will send this to all public libraries on or about the 10th. We may get it out tomorrow. It might be early next week for this month, but starting next month, it'll go out on the 10th. And then that'll give you guys 2 or 3 weeks to work through the items on that list. And then at the end of the month, James will do a bulk convert of anything at that end of month. At that point will then be 13 months in new materials from date cataloged, and he will bulk convert them as follows. Right now, there are about 600 items that meet this criteria in the system, and we have not bulk converted anything. So these are items that have been, since last fall, and there's only 600 of them. So we're doing a pretty good job RSA wide at the moment of keeping up with this. But for those that, the items that slip through the cracks, this is how things will get converted. We can't make any kind of per library exceptions, because this is just a very blunt instrument we'll be using here. So if your new books should not convert to book, please make sure that you have converted them to something else prior to 13 months. And this actually was part of the package that went out today. It was a copy of a thing we sent out in the fall, and this is at the very bottom of that particular document that talks about what was converting to what, and all of that was the 13-month conversion back to standard item types. So just want to give everybody a heads up that you will get a list. If you have any of these, you'll get a list, and then we'll give you a couple of weeks, and then we're going to start converting them from new to these item types in red. Any questions about that?
Also, I just want to mention that some of the libraries, you guys have been receiving your denewing reports monthly, clearly. And some of you have been sending a help desk ticket in, wanting me to go ahead and batch edit your denewing report. Just an FYI, if you want me to batch edit your denewing report, please send the report in with your help desk ticket. Don't send a ticket in saying, hey, batch edit all my stuff. I have no idea what the report is unless you send the report in, because we do not have the report here. So if you want me to batch edit everything on your denewing report, because first of all, I have no idea what's on the report, I have no idea. If your library was set up for 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months, nothing like that. So if you want me to batch edit your stuff on your denewing report, forward the list that you have and send it to the help desk. I have no problem batch editing it before this 13-month thing, you know. So if library A says, hey, after 4 months, go ahead and change it, we could do it for you early. We have no problem doing that, but just forward the list that you have. So we've had a few libraries just automatically think we have the list and we do not. So I just wanted to send that out there. So we could do it ahead of time if you want. So
And we also need to know what you want them changed to.
yes.
There are a lot of you and we cannot remember.
Yep.
All right, let's real quickly talk about budget stuff. A very, very quick overview. We talked a little bit up front, but the bottom line is for next year, there's an extra $155,712 of expenses that RSA will be paying to Rails to cover the cost of everything. And so the FY23 to FY24 changes are here. Basically, $137,100 is free services that we've been getting up until this point. Starting in FY24, we have to actually pay for this, write a check, pay for it. Not, oh yes, we've declared it on our budget so that the auditors can go, yes, you're getting this free value. No, we're actually paying for it now. So we are paying, if it cost Rails, you know, $1,000 to do a thing on RSA's behalf, then RSA will pay Rails $1,000. So we are paying fully for all of our staff and our costs and our expenses in Rails now. And all of the LSAPs are doing this. So other LSAPs might be using Rails for finance support, for example, and they will also be doing the same thing. They'll be paying Rails for that time spent in materials or whatever else is spent on that consortia's behalf. Just as a reminder, we talked about it at the last meeting, I'll remind you again, the fee increase for FY24, which starts with invoices in July for almost everybody. It's the greater of $150 or 5%, which works out to union listers, basic onlines, and full onlines with fees under $3,000, you'll go up $150. Anybody whose fee was over $3,000 this year will go up by 5%. And a lot of people have sent emails to the help desk and asked for their fees for next year. If you would like to know that, just send an email to the help desk. I send you not only what your annual fee is, but I also send you, like if we have any other things that we invoice you for, like overdrive, or maybe you've got the Hoopla connector or something like that, I also let you know what that cost is. So I try and give you the full cost of that you'll be invoiced from RSA. Oh, I need to stop the recording. Hold on just a minute. All right, so we just discussed the income and expenses of the FY24 budget, and we will move on. Okay, real quick, staff anniversaries. Jennifer's been with us for 3 years, Tony for 2, and Aaron for 1. The operations manager position, this is, as a reminder, Anna's position that we upgraded to become the number 2 position in RSA. We added a bunch of responsibilities to this position and increased the pay. That has been, we advertised that position in early January. We got our first round of applicants for that. And as of about 10:30 this morning, Rails HR is calling our candidates that we selected for, well, I selected for interviews. So we are going to be running interviews, as it turns out, the week of February 20th. So not next week, but the week after that, we're going to be doing interviews. And then depending on how that goes, we may do a second round of interviews after that with the same candidates. If we do the interviews and we're not happy with any of the candidates and don't think anybody is the right fit, we will just continue accepting applications, and we will continue to look until we find somebody. Was actually quite happy with the round of the people who, and I have no idea how many people actually applied, because the only people I see were the ones that HR said met all of the criteria that were listed out. So I don't know how many actually applied. I got it down to 3. So, but I think we've got a pretty strong candidate field. So I was very happy with that. Real quickly, you may have seen materials going to or from New Windsor Public Library. They are live. They started doing circulation like the Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve, something like that. And they started filling holds a couple weeks ago. They are filling holds to everybody. So you'll see New Windsor out on the sheets. Speaking of holds, hopefully everybody saw the email, but I did update the holds cheat sheet of the Rails hold number delivery, what you write on the delivery label cheat sheet. That's out on our membership page. I did update that because I think it was Rova changed their delivery code. There's an email went out about it. So please, if you still are using the very old forms, you might want to update those, because there was a change made to one of the libraries for delivery. Farmer City and Rova are still doing their thing. Rova is short on staff and not doing anything at the moment, but Farmer City is still cataloging. Okay, who remembers? Well, probably many of you remember a survey went out in December, because I sent, I think, 6 emails about the survey. And if I look at when surveys were filled out, I sent an email out on Monday, and surveys were filled out on Monday and Tuesday, and like 2 surveys were filled out on Wednesday. And then no surveys were filled out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or Monday the next week. But Tuesday the next week, I sent another reminder email, and then I got surveys filled out on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then no more after that. So if you wonder why we remind you on a weekly basis, it's because I can look at when I send an email, and 48 hours after that email goes, everything stops for a while. And then sometimes a month later, sometimes a year later, I will get an email back from someone that says, do you still need me to do this thing that you sent out? And they forward the email, and I look at it and I'm like, that's a year old. So no. So anyway, we did a survey this year to see what the best day time to hold users group meetings were, and to get some users group feedback. And interestingly enough, nothing has changed since we did this survey in like 2018 or 2019. Pre-COVID, we did this survey. That's why we started rotating meeting dates, was because nobody was really sure when the best time to do it was. And so we did a survey then. We tried rotating meetings for 3 years. It hasn't really changed much in the way of attendance. The biggest change in attendance is the fact that we do everything on Zoom now. So basically, after all of that, we had 60 some odd people respond back. You can see the part of one of the package documents was the actual counts, percentages for everything, and how many people applied. There was more than 60 people replied, and there was a statistical tie between the first and second Thursday and the first Wednesday of the month as what would be the best day to hold the meeting. And since there was a statistical tie, I selected the second Thursday to hold the meeting, A, because that's when we always did it before, and B, because that helps me. By being perfectly honest, it's way easier for us to do this on the second Thursday of the month than the first Thursday of the month, because that means we can hold the board meeting the week prior and it's still within the month, and it just makes life much, much easier. The only issue with that is that there are conflicts in August some years. And when I say conflicts, I'm not around on the second Thursday of some months in August. And And as you will see at the end of the meeting, this August is one of those months. So the number one time choice was 1 p.m. The number two time choice was 10 a.m. And the 1 p.m. preference was pretty strong, but the 10 a.m. preference was the next highest preference by a good margin. So 10 a.m. is kind of our alternate start time. If we ever run into problems with a 1 p.m. start time, we'll start these meetings at 10 a.m. Drilling down a little bit, who wants to attend in person? Well, a third of you, a little over a third, will never attend in person. Another third probably would attend in person, and 28% might attend in person if there was something else going on with it, which kind of makes me wonder about, do we need to do a Director's Day? And if we did a Director's Day and tied it in with users group, I wonder how that would work. And this would be something different than RSA Day, which is kind of aimed at staff of all levels. Users group has kind of morphed over time into more of a supervisor type meeting. So we may think about, and when I say we may think about, we'll talk about it in the future to see if there is, if there's desire to hold like a Director's Day. And if so, if there's a desire, that would also mean that people might be willing to help us design a Director's Day and then help us do sessions at a Director's Day. But it seems pretty clear that we're not going to get a great deal of people in person unless users group is tied with something else. And it's kind of unfair to hold an in-person and online users group, because inevitably the people in the room end up taking up 90% of the attention of the meeting. That's just how humans are. So it's just fair to do it all via Zoom or try and get a very huge group in person if need be, or if we can. Meeting style. This is something that I'm interested in and we're going to discuss later. Of the options that were presented in the survey, a 50-50 split of information and discussion was about half the preference. Information only was a third. Discussion-based was only 5%. Who these meetings are targeted at, pretty heavy preference for directors, managers, and supervisors. Again, we'll talk about this later. There's also probably some bias there, and the people filling out the surveys are also the people who may attend. And so we get some bias on that. But if you don't attend a meeting and you don't fill out a survey, I don't know what I can do for you. We did have several free text boxes. Whenever I do a survey, I try and put free text boxes in the survey because I love to see what you guys answer. The very top answer on the free text box on what we should change about users group was to make them shorter. And like several people pointed that out. Thank you very much. We have been better the last 3 meetings or so. We've kept right at 2 hours. Many other comments where you need to stay to 2 hours, but focus on two focused hours. Another popular comment was we need to be more focused on operational things, like things that might affect you day to day, but again, more at the director, supervisors, and manager level versus I'm a person working at the CERT desk and we need to remind you to click on a certain button. That is not really appropriate for this group anymore. I asked about who read the package. Half of the people read it, a quarter of the people don't read it, and the other quarter of people skim it or give it to their staff. I would like that number to be better, but it is what it is. I also asked about the wrap-up email, specifically because I'm not sure what to do at the end of these meetings to send out to the listserv to try and get people who didn't attend the meeting to get some idea of what was talked about at the meeting. And that's always been kind of a harder thing to do. So I asked about that. 69% of the people say they read the RSA state of the RSA report. When I look at the Google statistics for that particular link, it does not bear that out, but I will trust you on that. 21% say they don't read it. 8% of the people basically answered, "What are you talking about?" which is not as high a number as I worried it would be. Most people seem to like that we post a meeting wrap up, send send out the links to the package again. But it was pretty evenly split on what we should do with it, right? Should we send out full explanations of every package document and every document that maybe was created from the meeting and sent out? Or should we send just the links with a one sentence explainer of what it is? Or should we just send the links? That was very split. So no great thoughts there. The thing that we did have was that people would like slightly longer minutes than we had been posting in the past. We had really slimmed minutes down to just like a sentence and a timestamp. I think you'll notice if you look at the minutes from this meeting, we were back to paragraphs and a timestamp. So there's a lot more information in the minutes. So hopefully that will work to some of those thoughts. My question to you guys today is, when I send out the wrap-up email, what do you want it to, what do you want that email to look like? Right now, what I do is I type up the State of the RSA report, which covers some of the things from the meeting, and then I repost links to, well, it's actually in the State of the RSA report, but links to all of the meeting documents. How would you like to see that? What would be helpful to you as someone who attended the meeting, or maybe better, to those who didn't attend the meeting? If something appeared in their inbox, what would be the most helpful thing to appear in their inbox to try and entice them into looking at those meeting documents or the State of the RSA wrap-up or the meeting minutes when those come out later?
I'd say anything, like any action items, as well as anything that's, critically upcoming and changing.
So focusing just on the more of the operational stuff, or the, no, you really need to know this kind of thing, versus informational.
Right.
Well, as I said, this is our last discussion topic for the day, is talking about these committees and groups and what they should be in the future versus what they are now. So we have been trying to evolve this as we go. I think there's going to be a bigger kind of inflection point and change here coming up in the future. But I'll rethink it. I'll send it out. Those of you that have thoughts after it comes out, let me know what you think. I can only do what I think is good, and then based on your feedback, then I can start to change what we do here. All right, I did mention before that these annual themes, the idea of an annual theme is that we wanted to focus staff on something larger than just what they were doing day to day. That's not a kind of shorter project, but something to think about all year and try and get better at. And RSA's staff-wide annual theme is upgrading remote work. And this is probably a good time to do it, considering that we don't think that we will continue to pay in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 a year for a building after we go staff independent from Rails, right? So to do that, we would need to work from home more. We would need to borrow more of your office space or your conference rooms. But to get to that point, we need to be better at what we're doing, and we need to rethink our remote work. Like all of you, we went remote very quickly. I was on the other side of the world when RSA went remote, so I was really remote at the time. But everybody else went home and like grabbed a couple of computers and a monitor or whatever, and went home. And we've evolved kind of slowly since then, but we need a bigger rethink of how we operate internally and how we work with you. With a focus on thinking about RSA a couple of years in the future when we don't have this building and we are working more directly with you to do things. And, in-person events are coming back a little bit. In-person training might be coming back a little bit, depending on who you talk to, right? So These are all things that kind of fold into this theme. And the major points on this are learning how to communicate better. And sometimes that's just as simple as, rather than sending 10 text messages, I'll just pick up the phone and call somebody, right? But these things need to be built into your culture to get better at it. As I mentioned, we will be losing the Rails IT suite, so that'll be something that we have to replace. And since we've got to replace all of our IT needs anyway, it's a good time to experiment with new tools before we're actually kicked out, to find out if there are things that help us communicate as a team better. We need to better define our expectations on what we're doing and what our workloads are. Project tracking especially has been a bugaboo for a while. Help desk trends, these types of things. We need to get a clearer and a better handle on those types of things. We need to define what working without an office actually means, right? And that could be anything from, do we need to provide support from 8 to 5, or is there a better time that we need to provide support? Does my staff need to work from 8 to 5, right? Because that's when the phone might ring. Or, if we have staff that want to work till 6, do we want to try and provide support till 6? From our point of view, the phone does not ring much after 4 p.m., which is fine. I mean, don't feel like you need to call us and wake us up or anything, but the phone just doesn't ring that much after 4 p.m. And, I get it. There's staff turnover. The night people are coming on. The night people don't bug us that much. It's fine. But that is something we'll take a look at. In-person focused team days to work on particular things or do training or do staff development, right? If we don't have a building, how do we do that? Well, we're going to try and borrow your space. Well, okay, we've got a 2-year or so runway to learn how to do that before that's an actual thing. So part of our theme is to figure that out and get some procedures down for that. And then the last part of that is RSA staff thinking about, what does RSA look like 2 years from now, right? So staff independence is forcing us to do some changes, which is, as we discussed before, both good and bad. But if staff independence is forcing changes, then let's look at everything. Let's not just change a little bit and tinker on the edges and just slide by. We need to look at, okay, we have an opportunity to change the way we do our operations. Let's do it better, not just differently. So again, there's a lot of things that we can do with that. Some of those are system enhancements. Some of those are internal enhancements. When we're talking about RSA futures, that also involves you guys and having discussions at various different meetings on the types of new features and opportunities that you would like to see in the system, and figuring out what RSA next is. That's 5-10 years down the road. What does RSA look like? What's our, system, our ILS system look like? Do we need to do a migration, whatever, right? So this is the time that we need to start laying those groundwork to do those things, because those of you that were around in the 2006 timeframe when we did that RFP in 2006, there were 20-ish committees that were set up, and there were 3- and 4-day long in-person sessions with vendors, and then months and months and months of planning and setup and features and how do we want the system to work, and then setting it all up and reviews and all that, right? That's not something that we can just dream up and do, next week, right? You have to prepare for that. So all of that kind of goes into this RSA next feature, and it's not doing it now, but it's thinking, okay, what do we need to be doing to get to that? So there are chunks of this where we will be involving you as a group, or there are chunks of this where we will be involving individual libraries as we, borrow a conference room or borrow a study room or something like that to try and figure out how we're going to do all this. So any questions about the RSA annual theme?
Kendall, have you thought at all about what would happen with any like paper files or historical materials?
Yeah, I have. The biggest thing, paper files and historical materials take space, but they don't necessarily need to be like readily accessible. What does need to be readily accessible and in a neutral location and locked up are the things that we use to deposit checks. And so, you know, I one of the things I'm thinking about now is rather than renting out a third of this building, right, might be trying to work with Rails to see if we could just have 1 or 2 offices. And that would be it. And that's all we'd pay for. Because we do need someplace to store the check cashing machine. I mean, I've got a Morton Bank today sent me a remote deposit capture customer self-assessment that I have to fill out. And one of the questions on here is, you know, how secure is the machine? How secure is the laptop that the machine talks to? Where are you keeping the checks that you have deposited but have not shredded yet? All of that stuff needs to be locked up in a secure location. And we do 2-person touching for everything. I go to the lockbox and pick the checks up, but someone else has to open the checks and scan the checks. And then I take the scanned checks and I approve everything before it gets deposited. We can't do that at my house. That has to be done in a neutral location where we can keep that equipment. So there will be a small RSA office somewhere, but not to the point where we need to keep, you know, an entire staff there. And the other thing that's not in the RSA wide annual theme, because this is more internal stuff, is just the overall kind of independence thing means that the RSA board is going to be in charge of RSA, not, you know, in name only or not with policy. They're going to be in charge of RSA. They will be my boss. They will, you know, do all of the board things that boards do, right? And the board will be much more involved. And that's fine. It's not part of this annual theme, but it is, you know, we realize that as we are moving forward, we will be working with a different governance structure, which is honestly good. I think the more active the board is in many ways makes my job much easier. So. All right. And as promised, our last discussion topic of the day, what should these committees look like, right? Again, when I talk about RSA staff having an inflection point because we're moving to staff independent and we have to rethink a lot of things. Another thing that comes with this is we're probably changing our governance structure. We're definitely rewriting our bylaws. This is the time to look at what users group is, right? We are currently not Open Meetings Act. We are not an Open Meetings Act organization, okay? If we change our governance structure, which we're probably doing, we will be an Open Meetings Act organization. And I think we all saw that the Illinois exemption for not having everybody in one room ends on May 11th when the federal one goes away. So if we make RSA a governance group for users group, if that is a governance group, for us to have a users group meeting, we've got to have a quorum of our members in one room to vote on something. We may have to have a quorum of our members available one time to vote to enact the bylaws. I have to read up on this Open Meetings Act stuff and remember all of the various things. And when you're forming an organization with that is Open Meetings Act, that's what lawyers are for. They will tell me what we need, right? But I'm sure at least once we're going to have a big push where we just try and get as many libraries in one place as we can so that we can get everything approved. And then we don't have to do that again. But we need to think about what these committees are, right? Is this an informational committee or is this an action committee? Is the database group, is that an informational committee? Is that an advisory group? Is that information sharing only? All of our committees were structured around an RSA that does not exist anymore. They were all structured back in the, you know, the late 90s and early 2000s. And, You know, we've lived with them, but they have morphed over time, right? We're not yelling at each other anymore in users group because somebody's checking something out wrong. You know, that a lot of the things that used to happen in these meetings have shifted over time to being kind of an information sharing and less of a group discussion, right? So we need to rethink our committees, and we're not going to do it today, but I want you to all start thinking about this question of what should users group be? Should it even be called users group? Should this be the directors advisory committee or the, you know, directors networking group, the RSA director networking group, or RSA supervisor networking group or something, right? So we don't, so it's not Open Meetings Act, and it does serve the purpose that you guys seem to really want, which is information sharing and a little bit of discussion, right? That's what we need, but maybe that's not what we need. Maybe we don't need this group at all. Maybe we need a different group completely. So this is, I think we all need to start thinking a lot more about, of our committees that we currently have, are they meeting your needs? Are they doing what you need? Are you getting the information you need from a committee meeting, or does it just come through email and that's all you need? We don't have a school-focused committee. Do we need one? Could we get anybody to appear if we had one? This is a harder question. You know, so these are all the things that we need to figure out before we rewrite our bylaws, for sure. But this is users group, right? Which is more accurately described as kind of a directors and managers meeting. What should users group be? Right off the bat, do you guys have any ideas as to what you think users group should be versus what it is now? Or is what we're doing now kind of what you want, but we need to rename it? Feel free to unmute and or chat.
I'll go. I'm newer than some people and I'm smaller than a lot of libraries. But I think a lot of the things that we're covering are important, and maybe changing the name would maybe make more people in charge, or people that don't often attend, realize that it's something important they should be attending. Because when I was new, I'm like, RSA users group, what's that? And then I came and I'm like, oh, this is important stuff.
That was, a couple of people commented on the survey that they weren't sure what RSA users group was and who it was for. And again, we have heard that for years. All of our committees, we've heard that for years. What is the database committee for? Well, it's the cataloging committee. It's people doing mostly cataloging work. But what does it need to be, right? Because it has changed over the years. I'm sure Erica would echo my sentiment that the less I talk at this meeting, the better. The less Erica talks at her meeting, sometimes the better. You know, we love to provide guidance. We love to hear questions and kind of try and make things better for you guys. But having to sit down and figure out what to talk about for an hour and a half is not my favorite thing to do.
One thing that I will throw out there, some people might not be aware, Prairie Cat, I believe they still do this. They definitely did this years ago when I was involved in Prairie Cat. When they have their, 2-3 time a year big meetings, where, as Kendall just described, according to, bylaws and or Open Meetings Act, you need a quorum of your members in order to do anything. Prairie Cat actually has written into their into their bylaws, into their rules, I'll just say, that if libraries do not attend, they will be monetarily fined. And while that is a huge step and will freak some people out, I just want to throw it out there. It's worth discussing, especially if, as Kendall described, on paper, RSA, either the board or the employees or whatever, will not be able to function, will not be able to complete their tasks without a quorum, then we need to do something. And unfortunately, money usually talks. Didn't know if everyone knew that.
Yeah, and part of this is why I'm wondering, when we are working on trying to rewrite our bylaws and rewrite what we want to, what the breakout of the groups needs to be. One of the things that we can do is we can make the board all powerful, right? Because and make the board the thing that needs to really meet Open Meetings Act. And you can do that by saying, all right, these 5 board chairs are committee heads, right? And so anything that might happen in one of these advisory groups or whatever you end up calling them, so that you don't have to have 75 libraries in a room, each of the person running those committees would be a board member at that point, and they could bring any concerns raised or whatever to the board, and then the board would talk about them as a whole. And that might be a slightly bigger board. That could be a board the same size, just rearranged a little bit. There are ways to get around parts of this, but yes, if we have to have half our libraries in a room, once a year, we can get quite a few people in a room just by giving lunch for free. But that's a smaller subset of libraries. We actually need, half the libraries to show. And so that's just, it's going to be one of those fun things to figure out. Anybody else have any comments for now? This is kind of your think piece for the future. Y'all have my email if you ever think of anything. Madam Chairperson.
All right, so we don't have any other discussion of the topic. So is there any other business or other discussions that you want to do?
I just want to remind people, if you have not signed up already, RSA Day, it's coming soon to you on March 8th. It's going to be a good time. And as Kendall mentioned, we get a lot of people and we offer free lunch, and this one has free lunch.
Is free lunch is coming from what, Hy-Vee this year? Melissa?
Yes. Hy-Vee box lunch, going to be delicious. Also, lots of good topics that you're going to want to know about.
And Megan did have a comment about when the new structure has to be in place. I think we really don't have a solid timeline, but we do have to, I believe it was 2025.
Okay, so the sliding scale is 1 July 2024 through 30 June 2026. I am targeting 1 July of 2025 for the last cutover date. We may get it done sooner, but we can't. We need to do governance changes before we do staff changes. So I'm hoping to get the governance stuff done. Well, I had hoped to have it done by the 1st of July this year, but based on the glacial pace that things are moving right now, it may not happen. But that for tax purposes, because we do fill out taxes on our audit every year, it makes the most sense to change our governance structure on the 1st of July, because then we do a full year. The auditors can look at us as a 501c3, and then the next year we would not have to do tax forms or anything like that. So that's those 1 July dates are important for that. Also for doing staff cutovers, 1 July is also our the date of our the start of our fiscal year. So we either want to target 1 July as a staff cutover date or the 1st of January as a staff cutover date, one of those two.
Thank you, Kendall. Is there anything else?
I will point out that the August meeting this year is one of those Thursdays that I have a conflict. So we will do the meeting on the 2nd Wednesday of the month. So that second Thursday that we chose, that starts in the next fiscal year. We already had this 10 May meeting scheduled. The August meeting will be the second Wednesday instead of the second Thursday, and it will be a 10 a.m. meeting. So thank you for voting 10 a.m. We're going to give that 10 a.m. time slot a try. But I do want to note that because it is different from what we've been doing.
And you do have your schedules in your agenda, and they're all Zoom meetings. So
At this time, yes, they are all Zoom meetings.
all right, since we don't have anything else, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned at 2:56 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We got it done in under 2 hours.